It's time for the chip race.
For strategy this week, it's a hand of mine from the Battle of Malta back in October. The hand took place right before the dinner break, and I know that because it caused some consternation because Dara Davey and Dara O'Carney had agreed to make a break for the restaurant with me, and I was missing and uncontactable. Dara, you will probably remember that.
I do indeed remember that, yeah. We spent most of the dinner break talking about this. It was quite the outlier hand.
And I hope the fact that it was such a weird hand at least justified my absence and why you guys were probably getting quite pissed off at the fact that I was holding up us going for dinner. Anyway, it's big blind 1K with a 1K ante, and the player in the low jack, an Italian gentleman of about 55, 60 years of age, raises to 2,300 off a stack of 62,600. The hijack and cut off fold, I flat on the button with the ace 5 of diamonds off a stack of about 70k, so I cover him. Both blinds have approximately 50k each, so I cover them theoretically too. Small blind folds and the big blind calls. Dara, this is a hand that a lot of people like to 3-bet, but I actually think it works quite nicely off this stack as a flat here on the button. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it seems fine. I think you can't really go wrong in this spot. Flatting or raising are both fine. And you probably do need the hand in both ranges anyway. So from a theoretical point of view, it seems fine. As an exploit, I definitely like it.
Good stuff. Well, let's get to the flop. The pot is 8,400 and it comes the 10 of diamonds, 9 of diamonds, 2 of clubs. So I've got the nut flush draw there. The action goes check. 3,800 from the original raiser. I call and the big blind folds. Nothing controversial there, I think, but maybe I'll quickly throw it over to you, Dara, to maybe talk about the merits or demerits of a raise here.
I would definitely just call here. I mean, I guess the merit of a raise is maybe we can get in against a weaker draw, particularly when you have the nut draw. That is a kind of a spot where if you think there are a lot of weaker draws, I mean, on a 10-9 board too against a normal player, there are lots of straight draws as well that we're in amazing shape against because our ace high is actually good now. So I guess that's the major advantage of raising, but I would still call, yeah.
Very good. Well, to the turn, the pot is 16,000 now, and it comes the 6 of spades. So the board reads 10 of diamonds, 9 of diamonds, 2 of clubs, 6 of spades. He bets 5,000, so roughly 30%, and again, I call. Obviously, 8-7 gets there, and I could have all the sets, but to be honest, I get the impression that my opponent has something here. It's possible I could raise here and shove river and get him off some of that range, but I don't love having to risk my entire stack here, hoping to get him to fold an overpair if I don't improve. Calling seems smart, given that I am getting the direct price to draw to the nuts, and I could still have the best hand if he's betting a hand like King, Queen, King, Jack, Jack, Queen, the kinds of hands you mentioned there a moment ago. Dara, should I have considered a semi-bluff here, or is, again, my line pretty standard?
No, I think your line is very, very standard. I think if you want to start semi-bluffing here, it's actually with your weaker draws because it's a much better result for them. You know, if you have, let's say, a worse flush draw, then getting king high or queen high to fold is actually a really big result. Whereas when you have the ace high flush draw, it's actually not that big a deal because you were ahead anyway. So I think if you are going to construct a raising range here, you should be using your weaker draws rather than your stronger draws. Essentially, it's a different spot from the flop. The stronger draws tend to make better raises on the flop because they're going to have the equity to get it in anyway, and they can get it in against worse. But by the time you get to the turn, you're mostly just interested in realizing equity, which your nut draw. And if you had a weaker draw, then adding the fold equity of raising to your draw equity makes more sense.
Indeed it does. Well, to the river, the pot is 26,000 and it comes the king of diamonds. So the final board reads 10 of diamonds, 9 of diamonds, 2 of clubs, 6 of spades, king of diamonds. I'm licking my lips here. My opponent bet 6,500 and I try to figure out how much to raise. I take about 20 seconds, I suppose, something in that region before making it 23,000. And here's where the fun begins. The Italian gentleman counts out his stack. He riffles his chips. He counts them again. He stares at me for a while. He puts chips into one stack. He moves them sideways, then back over his cards. He looks at me again. 2 minutes of this sort of dance elapse. And despite only 20 seconds being left on the clock before the dinner break, time is called on him by another player, certainly a strange one. There follows some Italian chat between the villain and the clock caller. They both spoke Italian. Floor comes over, checks with the dealer who says that indeed enough time has passed and the player must act. After a few seconds, Villain asks, how long does he have? He's told by the floor he's got 50 seconds. He very surprisedly says, what, 20 seconds? And is told, no, you've got 50 seconds. I'm obviously doing my best to stay stony-faced here because I'm very much hoping for the call. Villain mutters in Italian, which I don't speak, but I can parse the phrase pocket jacks. At the 10-second mark, obviously the countdown starts, floor starts going 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. And on about the number 5, my opponent moves all in for 51,500, a very surprising move that I did not expect. I didn't just react really quickly and get my chips into the pot with what is effectively the second nut. So I was immediately thrown. Also, I felt like there was a need now to piece together all the physical stuff that he'd been doing, because I'd obviously been interpreting that in the context of I want you to call. And now I have to interpret in the fact of do you have the straight flush? And obviously I beat everything bar this one combo. I start to replay the hand. I start thinking about the body language, the possible meaning behind that phrase. That included the phrase pocket jacks in English, which I guess Italian guys, when they speak in poker terms, they do throw in the odd English phrase. So I don't think that was done to specifically target me that I would know that phrase. I think he was just speaking his speech play out loud, and that was the only bit I could parse. I ultimately tank for 5 full minutes into the dinner break while you're waiting for me and eventually fold. He offers to let me see one. I point at a card, which he then reveals to me to be the Queen of Diamonds. Dara, this is clearly a mad fold by me with the nut flush, only losing to that one combo. But when I eventually arrived to our dinner, I told you and Dara Davy about it. And aside from understanding what was holding me up all that time, you agreed with me that the fold versus this type of villain was probably the right play. Dara Davy didn't agree. He thought I should just get it in. But you focused in on the body language and the other physical stuff.
Yeah, I mean, all the body language just screams of strength. When people are thinking about a bluff, they don't draw attention to themselves in that way. And as a general principle, when people decide to bluff, they bluff quite quickly because they think that looks strong and therefore you're more likely to fold. Whereas when people take a lot of time deliberately and then put chips into the pot, it's pretty much never a bluff. It's not the case that people are sort of stealing themselves to bluff and then eventually bluff. Often a guy will think, well, even if he's sort of starting out thinking maybe I should bluff, but then he'll think 30 or 40 seconds, I've taken too long now. I look weak. So they end up folding. In my experience, every time you see this sort of Hollywood, for want of a better word, and then right at the last minute, they put in all the chips, it's pretty much the nuts. So I would expect him, based on that, my immediate reaction would be it has to be Queen Jack of Diamonds. I can't imagine that it's any other hand. Now, the only slight caveat on that is I think the only thing we can say with certainty or reasonable certainty is that he doesn't think he's bluffing. But is it just about possible that he's overplaying something else, like just the queen high flush? That might be a possibility, but it seems pretty remote. I don't think you're good enough here often enough to make the call correct against this specific opponent. Obviously in Solverland, we're just never folding this hand. But I think against a specific one we can. Now, the other thing, what Tommy Angelo calls Sixth Street, is after the hand is over, you can actually get quite a lot of information out of people then. And in my experience, people like to bluff, particularly if you've taken a long time. If they have a bluff, and particularly not to be too nationally biased against this, but I think Italians in particular like to show bluffs. So I think when a guy wants to show a bluff, if he has a bluff, he'll show you both cards and prove that he was bluffing and sort of take the plaudits of anybody watching. If they want to imply that they were bluffing, but they weren't actually bluffing, they will show you one card. And that's just to sort of put that down in your mind. Sometimes they'll choose the card because one card will make it possible if they were bluffing. If he's sitting there with the Queen Jack of Diamonds, it actually doesn't matter which of the two cards he shows. There's still the possibility that he was bluffing. I would pretty much stake my entire net worth on it being Queen Jack of Diamonds.
Oh, I love that you are willing to go that far. That makes me feel an awful lot better. Look, I have a feeling that when this hand goes out, it will polarize opinion. Maybe it won't. Maybe everyone will think that I'm a donkey, and now they're going to think you're a donkey as well, Dara, and they're going to be, bluffing you off the second nuts all day long. But I got to say, I think everything you said there is absolutely right. Obviously, I'm the one physically in the hand, and you're putting yourself into my shoes, but I think you're putting yourself into my shoes very, very well, and definitely vicariously experiencing what I experienced in order to maybe find the information that I did. When I posted this hand to Twitter, people were certainly gobsmacked. Nobody expected me to, first of all, have this hand, given how I explained I thought about it and folded, everyone thought I must have, a weaker flush, or maybe even had like a blocker that I was considering using for a hero call. I really appreciate your breakdown on this one. I also very much appreciate the fact that you burrowed down on all the physical stuff with me and, made allusions to other superb tells experts' instincts on this kind of one as well. The physical stuff is obviously necessary to justify my play.
Yeah, I was a little bit reluctant to have this hand, because it pretty much boils down to I had a read. That's the only really justification for this. I had a read that it had to be the nuts. And, you can use that justification in any spot to fold anything other than the nuts. But in this case, I think the overwhelming evidence from all the physical stuff was that he did actually have the nuts.
I think so. And remember, for him to not have the nuts, given the fact that he showed me the Queen of Diamonds, he had to have like the Queen 7 of Diamonds or the Queen 8 of Diamonds. And I'm not even sure this guy would open that from the low jack. I played with him for several hours. Yeah. I saw him open nothing fruity of that nature. Not to say that Queen 8 of Diamonds isn't a perfectly okay open from the low jack. It's actually not a bad play at all. It's probably a half and half kind of hand. But it just felt to me like he wouldn't have it in the range. He would probably need the Queen 10 suited to even open, which basically means that with the 9 and 10 on boards, the Queen Jack was the only sort of combo that makes any sense. Guys, look, I'm sure this one will create some stir and people will have opinion. It certainly did when we put it on Twitter. Please let me know what you think of this one. Darrow Kearney, thank you very much as usual.
Thank you, David.